Hey everyone, here's the stereotypes for every survivor in DBD. These stereotypes are mainly just common things I've noticed about each character, and so will be very subjective. Drop yours too down below, and let's get into it. Dwights are often seen as the resident noobs of DBD, as they're the very first character in the DBD lineup. And yeah, this is pretty true, at least for default Dwights. These Dwights do pretty much fulfill the stereotype of always hiding, especially in lockers, and just generally struggling with gameplay. Dwights also have the stark contrast gamer veteran Dwights though, who will be in the craziest outfit you've ever seen, possibly even Legacy, and will be able to loop you forever whilst constantly pointing in your face, only to hit you with the GG at the end. Meg. The core stereotype for Meg is the Meg heads, all Megs are stupid one. I think this honestly just kind of follows on from the new player Dwight one, and yeah, applies to Meg too to some extent, as she's also a free character you unlock immediately, so default Megs do tend to be like this. I have to say in general though, Megs more widely often seem to be very overconfident players, but they rarely back it up with skill. They'll spam click their flashlight and teabag you, and then you chase them, and they'll run into a wall and then do the most pitiful spin you've ever seen. Claudette. I think default Claudettes also follow the same stereotype as the two before, being sort of noobs. I'd also say Claudettes in general are viewed as very similar to the character. They're usually the healers of the game, but often are also very shy players too, and do tend to hide quite frequently. There are the godly versions of them too though, who will guarantee hole you every time. Jake. Same goes for default Jake again, rounding out the original four. Jakes are tough players to place, but I tend to find a lot of them are pretty sneaky and smug with how they play. They're the type of player to completely throw the match if it means they somehow bamboozle or trip up the killer in some way, like a sabotage or just super risky play. Jakes will always go for them and put their heart into it, even if it means they horribly die. Nias have like a billion stereotypes. But the most common one of course is that they're the most toxic survivors, with their bright neon outfits constantly clicking and teabagging you. I think the stereotype is amplified by the fact that so many YouTubers in the early days of DBD tended to main Nia, and would frequently juice the killers as her. Nia players are often also considered just generally a bit suspicious. Every time they do something a little weird or a bug happens with them, everyone raises an eyebrow. What's going on with you, Nia? What are you really? Bills are players who embody their character maybe more than any other survivor. They are possibly the most self-sacrificial and altruistic players you can come across, with them never leaving a trial if someone's still in it. Bill players are also well known for pretty much always having his teachables on as well. It's so rare to ever find a Bill without Unbreakable, although the ones that do run left behind can often be a little bit selfish. Laurie. Despite Laurie being around for quite some time, I don't have much of a stereotype for Laurie as she isn't played much. I'd say they tend to be quite aggressive and confident players though, and I think it's probably because of their DS and even object of obsession in the early days, back when you could see the exact location of the killer. Playing Laurie used to kind of be a death sentence, and therefore you have to lock in, so I think it's the leftovers of that. Ace. The most common ace stereotype is the comp ace in the grey suit who is either really good or really bad. Either they juice you or they're the biggest wannabes ever. Aces are never seen without a smug smirk on their face or beamer in their hand, and just a general bit of attitude. The other type of aces are the ones with either full leopard print or completely pink outfit who just think he's kinda cute. Fungs are interesting and complex and don't have a single stereotype either. As so many people play her, it's hard to pin down. Some people just play her for her vast array of outfits, with her having like triple what everyone else does. There's also the toxic ones who dress up bright and neon like the toxic Nias and follow in their footsteps. Then there's the bunnies who are the ones you need to be really careful around. Those ones are deadly. Davids channel their inner British person and want to actually fight every killer they encounter. Davids are bold, even if their skill often doesn't match up to their boldness. They'll run in for the beamer or pallet save and always be the first to take a hit for you. Also, they hate shirts. Quentin players have been through a lot, and this is largely what they embody. They're just tired and trying to get through the trials. They don't necessarily stand out as particularly toxic or bold or altruistic, but I always find them to be good teammates when with them, and fairly formidable to face. It must be the lack of skins. They learn to get by without much appreciation. Tapps are very similar to Quentin's, I think, in that they're often just consistently good players and teammates, but are never very flashy or outward about it. They get on with the trials and lock in, usually playing well. I do find Tapps are a little more altruistic though as well, and they always seem to run toolboxes I find. Maybe it's because of like stakeout and all that stuff. Kates I think are probably one of the most consistently good players I'd say, without being too toxic or bold or whatever about it. They're just confidently good, I find. They're always pretty solid loopers, killers and contribute to the team well, and they usually give me a hard time on the killer side, and they're rarely that toxic I find. They're also great with the beamer. Adam. These poor guys, they run Deliverance and yet they always get hooked first. Adams are often seen with medkits in their hand, and are often very altruistic players to a fault, even though they frequently end up getting you killed, I find. Like, they'll come for a body block, and then they just end up cutting you off instead, but they'll apologize profusely in endgame chat. They're trying, and that's what matters, right? Jeff players have got to be the most chill players that are out there, and embody the character pretty well. They usually have a medkit in hand and will be very altruistic. They're not the best at skill checks though, I'd say, and tend to struggle a bit with looping, but they're good teammates, so you can't complain. Jane players are usually dripped out and ready to head on you at a moment's notice, being quite aggressively altruistic players, I'd say. They love to get up in your face as killer, and they are equally quite altruistic when needed by their team. I rarely see them on gens though, I have to say. Ash players are hard to place as they're not the most popular of characters, but I find they often reflect the energy of Ash himself pretty well. Largely incompetent and very clumsy, but things usually end up working out for them in one way or another. They stumble their way through the trials, and usually to victory, so hey. Nancy. I'm not sure why, but Nancy seem to be the most evil players on the planet. Nancys are locked in and they do not care about your feelings. They wield beamers like weapons and will relentlessly teabag and provoke you and then actually back it up with skill. It's heartbreaking every time. Nancys are probably one of the survivors I find the scariest, to be honest. Steve has a few stereotypes as well. A bit like Ghostface for the killer stereotype, Steves are often viewed as the memers. They'll run silly perks and try to mess around. But then there's also their insecure cousins who hate if the killer ever tries to meme back or outplays them in any way. There's also of course the Steagulls, who are less nowadays after their nerf, but they do still exist. Steves are always a 50-50 on if they're good or bad players, I find. Yui for me is the type of survivor to go for the riskiest of saves. I think probably because of the fact that she is breakout. They seem to always try and make the most of this perk even though it's terrible. Yuis are usually pretty good at the game though, I'd say, and are never seen without something on them glowing, whether it be something bright neon or a literal glowing tail. Zarina players are also consistently quite good, I find, and are some of the most silently locked in players out there. They usually don't wear anything too flashy, they don't try and intimidate or mock the killer, but they just efficiently get the job done whilst playing consistently well. Probably one of the best teammates to have. Cheryl players are usually deceptively quite good. I say deceptively as they often do make weird plays like vaulting directly into you, but then the next time you find them they run you for 3 gens like it's nothing. It's a strange combo, but I find they're always like this, either giga brain or no brains at all, and all within one match. There are also the Lisa players who are always good, or they're running her just for the scream. Felix. Majority of Felix players I guarantee run him for the drip, and a portion of them once again hate shirts. Felixes I find are never that amazing, but they're always trying. They sort of remind me of default Leons in a way, where you can tell they're doing their best, but it just isn't going so well for them. Élodie players might be the only players I associate with using maps, which is kind of strange, but I feel like if I see a map in a lobby, it's always an Élodie that has it. I'm not sure what they're doing with them all, but yeah, Élodies seem to love maps. They also really try their best to get deception value in chase, but it just never works because you always expect an Élodie to have this perk, or at least anticipate it more, so it can be kind of heartbreaking to witness sometimes. Yun-Jins unfortunately I do find embody their characters pretty accurately as rather selfish players, who will often just zone out the rest of their team and just stick a gen even if their entire team is being slugged or halfway dead. I say this lovingly as well as a Yun-Jin main, but they just do not care about the well-being of others. They're usually pretty good loopers though, and do aid the team, they just aren't very altruistic. Jill. The best way to define Jills I think is that they're always trying, it just doesn't always go in their favour, but they do always try. Default Jills especially seem to just not be the greatest, but if you encounter them wearing any other skin, they're usually marginally more threatening, but still kind of a bit of a goofball. Leon. The main stereotype for Leon is the default Leons that are the biggest noobs ever. Super new players who seem incredibly clueless, but they're also super cute whilst doing it. I think this is probably a product of when Resident Evil came to the game and there were lots of new players who came specifically for it, but it's weird because even today's default Leons seem like massive noobs, so it's kind of strange. I don't have much of an opinion on Leons who aren't default, but they usually do seem better than those who are, so that's all I got. Mikaela is the resident boon character, and she does tend to pretty much always be seen with a boon, or, well, circle of healing. On the whole though, they're never that great at placing them, and I always find them repeatedly doing them in some awful spot, regardless of a killer stomping them out repeatedly. Mikaela's usually have the whole hex name, like hex something, and avoid objective responsibilities like the plague. Doing bones you, and all that. Jonah, well, it's hard to say as they're so rare, but when I do encounter them, they're usually always running overcome, but rarely get value out of it as they'll get exhausted beforehand or something like that. In fact, this is kind of the vibe I get from Jonahs, is they have some grand plan for the game and some awesome intricate build, which just never ends up working as intended. But at least they tried something unique, right? Yoichi players I often find are weirdly quite cocky, especially when they've got that blue jacket on. Something happens to them, and it's like the control button suddenly seduces them, calls out to them like the green goblin mask. They're also very insistent when it comes to claiming Dark Theory is a good perk, or just viable at all, not completely awful. They are usually quite friendly players in endgame chat though, the type to rail you all game and then hit you with the GG's bro. Haddie players have got to be some of the most unlucky ones in the game, and whilst I can't prove it, I'm pretty sure the entity intentionally sabotages Haddie players somehow. They try really hard and do their best, yet some kind of BS always seems to trip them up or catch them out. They just can't catch a break for whatever it is. They'll run for the beamer save and directly into a trap, or they'll leave a gen and immediately get a skill check, wait for a teammate to help them but get locked in from Blood Warden, that type of thing. The entity got beef with them, but they never let it get them down. Ada's are sort of like the female version of aces, with them typically being associated with sweaty comp players, largely due to her very quiet sounds. However, in Ada's case, I find they're pretty much always very good players, and you rarely find a bad Ada player. They do tend to be a little more selfish though in how they play, but are still valuable assets to the team. Rebecca. This is the image I think of when I think of Rebeccas. They're just like the sweetest people on the planet, and I don't think I've ever seen one teabag or even use a flashlight for that matter. They always have a medkit and they're usually just doing their own thing. I also can't remember ever facing a particularly good one though, but they're just so chill, like it's who cares? Thumbs up Rebecca players. Vittorio players are another group who seem to not be able to keep their shirts on, and there's a good chance that's why they're playing him in the first place. Aside their aversion to shirts, Vittorios do tend to follow the trend I find of being out of place and time, with them not understanding how generators work, as they often miss skill checks. They are, however, usually great loopers. Thalitas are almost always locked-in players. Maybe it's a Lyra siblings thing. Thalitas I often see with toolboxes and using gen builds. They're also quite stealthy players I've always found. It's tough to find a Thalita, but when you do find them, they're actually good loopers. It's not even like they're hiding because they're bad. Hinatus I find are in the same vein as Ace and Ada, and tend to have very locked-in players who play like it's comp. Hinatus are pretty consistently good loopers, and they do actually hit beamer saves, which tracks I suppose with him having background player. The other thing I find about Hinatu is that his players seem to rarely run any outfit that isn't his base. I feel like I only ever see Hinatus in their base look. Gabriel. There's something about Gabriel players that makes them really confident for some reason, and my theory is that it's from the Made for This days, back when their crutch teachable perk was actually good. Despite the MFT nerf, Gabriel still play like they have it, which either really works in their favour or completely against it, and gets them downed a few seconds into the chase. There's also the Gabriels who run the weirdest outfits, and I usually find they're pretty good at the game. Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cages are usually some of the most chill players, as is the entire vibe of Cage himself. Their players use him for the love of the game, and usually are always stacked up with meme perks, but still back themselves up as pretty solid loopers. They love the perk plot twist, and also gambling with dramaturgy. This does also mean though that they frequently get a bad roll and throw the entire game because they got exposed. Ripley's are another survivor stereotype I don't have a clear vision on, as not many people play her. From a killer perspective, I do tend to find Ripley's are a bit clueless as to what's happening though, and I always see them running off into walls or trying to play the worst loops ever. As a teammate, they're often fairly decent though, so I don't know really. I do like seeing them though. I like seeing Jonesy in the lobby. Alan Wake. Alan players are some of the most dramatic ones out there, matching to the character's piercing screams very well. When coming for a save, they'll do it in the most dramatic way possible, heroically leaping down from a ledge or something like that. They're also always seen with a beamer and also flashbangs as champions of light. Sable. Sable is a bit like Feng or Nia, where because she's so overplayed, there's not really a singular stereotype I have for them, and really she could fall into almost any stereotype, sometimes being good, other times bad, and so on. The main consistency between Sable players is their love for fashion though, and they either do a great job at it, or create the most bizarre monstrosity of an outfit ever. I also find Sables rarely run items, and my theory behind that is just that they want to see her drinking from her cup in the lobby. Aestri. Aestri players I find are often very memey and will always be seen with their loot, but also perks like Deception and Blast Mine and Pebble and stuff like that. There's a certain mischievousness to them that they even perform toward their team. They're a memer, but they're also focused more on their own fun, I think. Baermar, you know, I don't have anything. I've seen like 2 of them in the few years they've been out, and they weren't very memorable, so sorry Baermar players. Lara Croft. Laras are often players who run full meta, but do also have quite a bit of skill I find. Whilst they're buffing themselves up in every way they can find, they can also take a chase well, and do contribute their fair share to the team. They're especially deadly and locked in if they have that burning skull mask on. Those Laras are terrifying. Trevor. Honestly, my biggest stereotype for Trevor is that I see more Alucards than Trevors, so I reckon he should probably just be renamed to Alucard, to be honest, because no one seems to play this guy unless it's for playing Alucard. Alucard players, though, are often very dramatic, a bit like the Alan Wakes, and will billow their cape at any chance they get, and try to pull off some crazy stunt. Taurie. Tauries are a bit like Yun-Jins and do tend to embody their survivor quite well, and do end up often sabotaging teams quite a bit, with them focusing more on themselves rather than others. However, there's also definitely a reformed branch of Tauries who do want to help their team, and will also be very self-sacrificial to almost a fault, sometimes even a bit too much, to the point of being detrimental, as they really want to get shoulder the burden value. Some of these Tauries would genuinely collapse and die at the trial start if it meant giving a teammate a 5-second speed boost. Orela. This is another character I find that is represented well by their player base, as Orelas are literally always altruistic players and will do their best to help you out. A bit like Claudette though, they are set up with an entire set of altruistic perks, so maybe that's why. Altruistic players are possibly just drawn to altruistic characters like this. It makes sense. Rick players I find are kind of in the noob territory as well. I feel like Ricks are always the first to die, or they get tunneled out. It just seems like these poor guys never catch a break. Maybe it's all of his awful perks he has. They're seriously just like terrible. The deciding factor that changes them, however, is when they put the hat on. Then the killer's in trouble. Ricks always seem to have a toolbox as well. Michonne. Michonnes I kind of find are the same as Ricks, with them just not being the best, and also sort of getting targeted. Much like Ricks though, once they put on the hood, they seem to lock in and are near untouchable. Unlike Ricks with their toolboxes, Michonnes typically have beamers I find, and can usually use them pretty well. V players I also find embody their character quite a bit, as all Vs I've met are always super hyper and they can never decide what they want to do. They'll go sit on a gen and then 2 seconds later you'll see them running off for a flashlight save, only to go cleanse a totem or go to the basement for a chest or whatever. They just can't seem to make their mind up on what to do or what to focus on. They are usually pretty good loopers though, and love their beamers. Dustin. Dustins often seem a little bit clueless to me, and I think do somewhat fit the new player stereotype a bit like default Leons as well, and likely for the similar reason of them releasing alongside a huge franchise. Dustins are great gen jockeys though, and I pretty much always see them with a toolbox and a set of gen related perks. A large portion of them are also Eddie players who are not too dissimilar, but will always have bardic inspiration on as well, in true Eddie style. 11s I find are usually the most experienced of the two and tend to play much better in general. They've got the 11 flowing through them. She's quite new as well though, so I don't really have much to say about her honestly, but her players are usually pretty good I think. Tae-young. Another case of being way too new to really have any sort of stereotype, but I do get the feeling that this is a character people partially play for the drip, but he unfortunately doesn't have much drip yet, so all the Tae-young mains are doing their best to stand out with their 3 different coats. I'm sure you'll get more someday, guys. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know your own survivor stereotypes down below. Thanks, and goodbye.